So today we're going to be looking at the Portland Timbers in terms of the moving forward series, and there's really two ways you can look at how the Timbers did this season. You can either say that this was somewhat a frustrating year for the Portland Timbers because of the multiple blown leads that they suffered during the regular season, and that for the second year in a row they got eliminated in the first round of the playoffs, although this season is probably more frustrating compared to last season when they suffered that first round playoff exit on the road in the hands of RSL, because at least this season they were playing at home against FC Dallas, who they were heavily favorites to win, but ultimately they weren't able to win that game and lost in a penalty kick shootout that ultimately led to another elimination in the first round of the playoffs. But on the other hand, you can say that this was relatively a decent season for the Timbers, because at least they won the MLSisback tournament and won some silverware by the end of this season, which is something that 24 other MLS franchises aren't able to accomplish by the end of the season. And also because they won the MLSisback tournament, they are also able to qualify in the CONCACAF Champions League heading into next season. But overall, they finished with a record of 11-6-6, and they finished with 39 points. They scored 46 goals, which besides LAFC, that's actually the most goals that any team have scored this season. They finished with 35 goals allowed, which is right around the middle of the pack in terms of the amount of goals that each MLS team have allowed. But when you look at all these teams that made it to the playoffs out of the Western Conference, only LAFC and the Quakes actually have gave up more goals than the Timbers that made it to the playoffs out of the Western Conference. So yeah, the defense was kind of a little bit of an issue at time this season for the Timbers, but still they finished with a respectable goal differential of plus 11. They finished third in the Western Conference, which they could have finished first in the Western Conference because of the fact that they were actually in a three-way tie with both Seattle and Sporting KC, with all of them finished with 39 points at the top of the Western Conference. But when you look into the tiebreaker, that's when they got on the wrong end of it, as unfortunately the tiebreaker out of all three of those teams sees that Sporting KC has the better tiebreaker, followed by the Seattle Sounders, and then you got the Portland Timbers, who had the worst part of the tiebreaker and ultimately finished third in the Western Conference. They got eliminated in the first round of the playoffs by FC Dallas, as I mentioned before, but they also won the MLSisback tournament, which was their golden ticket to make it to CCL heading into next season. Now, in terms of the MVP of this team, I decided to go with Diego Valeri again, and if I would have done MVP in my past moving forward series in the past couple of years, and whenever I do the Portland Timbers, I would obviously put Valeri as the MVP because he's really the heart and soul of this team. But I could have actually put somebody else to be the MVP, and that this was actually a little bit of a difficult decision of who I should decide to put as the MVP of this team, because when you look at all these players, and especially on the attacking end, a lot of these guys could definitely deserve to be the MVP of this team, whether it's Jeremy Abowosu, who once again had an incredible year, or some of their newcomer like Felipe Mora, Yaroslav Niskoda, and Jimmy Char that have made this attack much more dynamic and much more powerful, or even Sebastian Blanco, who was really the heart and soul and really the player that kind of carried this Timbers team to make it all the way into the MLSisback tournament final and ultimately winning the trophy and become the MVP of this team. And heck, if Blanco didn't actually suffer a torn ACL near the beginning of the first phase of the regular season, I would have probably put him as the MVP of this team, because besides the fact that he was amazing doing the MLSisback tournament, he was still doing amazing even after the tournament, and the form that he had in the MLSisback tournament just kind of continues until unfortunately he suffered that torn ACL in the first couple of games in phase 1 of the schedule. But ultimately, I'm still going to go with Diego Valeri because he leads the team. Well, he actually is tied with Abowosu in terms of the top goal scored, and he's second on the chart in the top assist leader with 7 assists, and he is still pretty much the heart and soul of this Portland Timbers team, despite the fact that he is going to be turning 35 heading into next season, and that he's been doing an amazing job, and probably even better than what many people thought of flying fodder time and continue to produce at a rate that, even though as he's getting older and as many people thought that he would be slowing down, that is not the case with Diego Valeri. Now, for disappointment for this Timbers team, there wasn't really a lot of player I could have picked in terms of being the disappointment, but I'm actually going to go with Thomas Konechny, which, remember when the Timbers bought him a couple of years ago and that they thought that he would be a guy that has some great potential to be a decent attacker in this league and could definitely be one of their weapons in terms of scoring goals on the attack. Yeah, that's something that feels like that hype and that potential that they saw him a couple of years ago are pretty much false now, because this season he really struggled in terms of getting minutes and was very deep into the attacking depth chart for the Timbers. And I really think this offseason, most likely he is going to be leaving this team, and really for the sake of his career and the fact that he really needs a change of scenery to try to kind of fulfill his potential, because, you know, if he's going to stay with this team, he's not going to get playing time, especially with the way that, as I mentioned, he's pretty much buried deep into the attacking depth chart that the Timbers had, and that as long as some of the attacker that is above him in the depth chart continue to perform, there's no way that he's going to get any minutes with this team anytime soon if he decided to stay with this team heading into next season. Now, in terms of top goal scorer, we got Diego Valeri and Jeremy Ebobisse both finished with 8 goals as the top goal scorer of the team. Then you got Felipe Mora and Yaroslav Niskoda not far behind with 7 goals. And then we round out with Jimmy Chara with 4 goals in terms of the top goal scorer chart. Top assist leader is actually Jimmy Chara with 8 assists, followed by Diego Valeri with 7 assists. Diego Chara actually finished with 6 assists this season, which is, I think that's probably the most assists he has ever registered throughout his entire career, because for a guy that is kind of like a deep line midfielder like Chara is, I didn't think that he would be contributing on the attacking front as much as I did this season, and able to register that many assists during this season. But that is exactly the case, as he actually ends up with 6 assists and only 2 assists away from his brother Jimmy Chara, who ends up to be the top assist leader. Then you got Sebastian Blanco and Eric Williamson, both ends up with 5 assists to round out the top assist leader chart for the Portland Timbers. Now, what went right for the Portland Timbers this season? As I said, they won the MLSisback tournament, which pretty much guaranteed themselves to qualify to the CONCACAF Champions League heading into next season. And they also have one of the best attack in the league. Like, there's no doubt that on most night this Timbers team was a very fun team to watch, and that the attacking power that they had and the attacking arsenal that is in their disposal was absolutely incredible. But now, moving to what went wrong with this team, well, it's also pretty obvious what went wrong with the Portland Timbers this season. It's the multiple blown leads that they suffer in the regular season. And I even said during the time whenever they suffer those multiple blown leads, I basically said that they got to stop this habit, because if they do not stop this habit in the regular season, it's going to come back to haunt them when playoff time comes. Well, guess what happened during playoff time in that game against FC Dallas? They suffer another blown leads in that game and gave up a late goal to Dallas, which sent that game to extra time. And ultimately, when the game went to a penalty kick shootout, the Timbers weren't able to win that PK shootout. And ultimately, you can say the blown leads habits that they've been having a lot of problems to try to shake off, and it's become a habit that they had throughout the entire last season, ultimately cost them in terms of moving on into the next round of the playoffs. The second thing that went wrong is the defense was suspect at time this season. As I mentioned, they had the 3rd worst defensive record of all 8 playoff teams that made it to the playoffs in the Western Conference, and that's something that they're going to have to fix and have to address heading into this offseason. And then the third thing that went wrong for the Timbers is definitely the home form. It continued to be a problem this season, in that they actually had the worst home record of all 18 of the 18 that made it to the playoffs in the Western Conference. Although I will say that I'll give the Timbers a pass about their home form this season, because they were one of the many teams that weren't able to play in front of their fans after when the season was suspended in March. And we know that when you are not able to play a home game in front of fans, that really take away your home field advantage. And we already seen a lot of teams this season when they aren't able to play their home games with fans. They have really struggled this season compared to previous year when they were able to play games in front of their home fans. They are able to solidify that home field advantage, and kind of also is another way of me saying that yeah, fans really matters when they're actually in the stands, and that especially for the Timbers. You know, if the Timbers army was behind them every single game, and if every single home game for the Timbers there's 25,000 strong at Providence Park, there's no doubt that their home record is going to be much better than the one that they registered by the end of the season. And to some extent, they probably wouldn't have suffered those multiple blown leads that they had throughout the regular season if they actually have their home fans in the stadium and have the Timbers army behind their back. Now, moving forward for the Timbers, the first thing I want to mention in the moving forward department for the Timbers is that, you know how I've been saying that this team feels like they need to be in a win now situation, because when you look at the attacking core, it's kind of like aging badly, and some of the players that is kind of like the heart and soul of this team is really aging badly, and that they really need to eventually maybe go in a win now situation to give them like one last hurrah before they retire. Well, that might actually not be the case, and that now that I kind of look at their roster and really just look at how they did last season, it seemed like they might not be in a win now situation, mainly because it seemed like they have found a new batch of attacking talent. Like as I mentioned with some of these new arrival with the likes of Felipe Mora, Niskoda, and Jimmy Chara, they have really added that not only more attacking power to this team, but this might be the next batch and the next generation of Timbers attack that is going to form a good core into this team. And that if that of course is the case, then I don't think they're going to be in a win now situation, but more kind of like now that it seemed like they have just solidified their future for down the line, and that they can still be competitive and don't have to go through a stage where whenever we see teams that have aging player in terms of their core, they might have to go through a transitional period. Now, that being said, I'm not saying that they should just pretend that next season they should just suffer another early playoff exit and continue to kind of frustrate their fans of the fact that why is this team aren't able to make it past the first round all of the sudden. But still, I think with the way that when you look at the attack and how a lot of the players that contribute in terms of the goal scoring, besides probably their most important player, Valeri, has really stepped up to the plate. Something tells me that this team is going to continue to be decent, even if some of their aging player, like Diego Valeri and in some extent Sebastian Blanco, potentially is not going to be with this team in the future. Now, the second thing moving forward for them is obviously they need some reinforcement in the defense, and in some way they kind of are starting to address that. I know they have recently signed a fullback from Chivas who, oh god, I actually forgot his name all of a sudden, but they are started to working in terms of trying to find some reinforcement, and they also have just recently re-signed Mabiela to a new contract, which should once again him being there should once again solidify the defense and kind of bring some new continued leadership in terms of trying to get this defense get more solid heading into next year. And then the last thing for the Timbers moving forward is that they're desperately want their fans back in the stands heading into next season. And this is not just because Timbers fans want to go back to Providence Park to support the team, but the fact that I think this is one of those teams that they really rely on their fans in terms of pushing them to get all 3 points, and that I think next season, if Providence Park is going to be filled up, or even not even been filled up, but maybe half or with limited capacity, I feel like it can really help their home form heading into next season. And also, just as a neutral perspective and watching a Timbers game, it just feels really odd last season that besides the first two games that they play at home before the season was suspended, it was really strange just watching a Timbers game where there was no atmosphere whatsoever. There was no Timbers Army chanting throughout the full 90 minutes, and it just kind of feels empty in some way. And I'm pretty sure a lot of these Timbers players kind of feel the same thing, where it just doesn't feel like the same, and kind of maybe is one of the reasons why they just feel like these home game doesn't mean as much, and that maybe they kind of started to kind of lose a little bit of the concentration because of the fact that their fans are not really pushing them to be at 100% and pushing them to get a victory throughout every single home game. So yeah, I think the Timbers, they definitely want to have their home fans back into the stands, and I know heading into next season, even with the vaccine that is being rolled out around the country, there's no guarantee that every single stadium is going to be having full capacity, but even with limited capacity, I think it will be a big help, and it will go a long way in terms of really helping the Timbers to make Providence Park a fortress again, but also as a neutral, really want to hear like the atmosphere that Providence Park would generate, and that for me, I always would think that Providence Park has one of the best atmosphere compared to every single MLS stadium that we had so far. But yeah, there you have it. That is pretty much it for the moving forward series for the Portland Timbers. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this video, and if you're a Timbers fan, what do you think went right, what went wrong, and most importantly, moving forward, what do you think this team is going to look like heading into next season. But until then, hope you guys enjoy this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.